I'm not a big fan of roguelikes. I'm not saying it's a bad genre. The very concept of a game that you can play endlessly is certainly cool, but forgive me, I already have several games that have already taken up a lot of my time and nerve cells. But before anyone criticizes me, I should clarify that I enjoy a couple of roguelike games. In particular, Slay the Spire. No, not like that. Slay the Spire. And you don't have to look far to see why. Because for those who don't know, I'm a sucker for overpriced cardboard. So it's not surprise that practically the only roguelike I've ever loved is related to my hobby. Besides, I've noticed that the concept of deck building and cards with silly pictures and text on them has fascinated me my whole life. Like, come on, my favorite Adventure Time episode is the one about Card Wars. So when I stumbled across two indie roguelikes about using cards to significantly reduce the available space in the cemetery, I didn't think twice. So let me tell you about two indie deck builders that might brighten up a few of your evenings. And moving on to the first stop on our route, I want to ask you a harmless question. Do you like psilocybin mushrooms? The first thing that catches your eye when you see Shroom and Gloom is its visual design, and that's what piqued my interest when I first saw it. At the beginning, Shroom and Gloom confused me a little, because instead of a proper tutorial, the game greeted me with a tumbling hand clutching a piece of paper with a letter W on it, which I will take as a compliment from a game that I'm a W, okay? Despite the chaotic start, here's what a player has in his arsenal. In addition to the standard deck building attributes such as mana and health, you get not just one, but two decks at your disposal. Green cards represent the exploration deck, and red cards represent the combat deck. While the second deck is clear, I suggest taking a closer look at the first one. The thing is, the player travels through the local dungeon not by following markers on the map, as is usually the case for deck builders, but by actually traveling on foot, pressing down the W button. The cards in the exploration deck are used to help the player progress through the dungeon, for example by opening doors and chests and recovering or preparing for upcoming battles by restoring health, digging up cards or receiving buffs before battle. The game is full of fun and interesting concepts that are atypical for the genre. For example, when I stumbled upon a local store, I was surprised to realize that there is no money in the game at all. So acquiring new cards in stores require exchanging specific types of cards for another. And each time, the merchant will demand something new from you. In the first shop, a cunning beaver offered me his cards in exchange for my keys, and without them, my character would have to essentially break his fingers and lose health every time he encountered a door or a chest. Or, when you find a special card while exploring, if there are suitable platforms in the room, you can create a dummy that will allow you to upgrade one attack card. If you have the mana, of course. Before I move on to the enemies in combat, I want to touch on the game's style, which is what initially drew me in. The style, in my opinion, is truly distinctive and captures the surreal nature of the local setting. Thorn and vines part as you move through caves, bioluminescent worm-like things protruding from every surface, clumsy-looking mushrooms and mold, card designs that look like silly doodles made by marker, or in some way even like graffiti that would be made in some alleys and gateways of big cities. Everything plays on the surreal feeling, especially the music. On its own, it's a bland ambient, but combined with everything else, it's the perfect melody for your trip. For context, when I first launched the game, I was sick and had a fever with a temperature of nearly 38.5 degrees Celsius. So you can imagine how I felt playing this game in that state. It's like a literal adaptation of the meme about the kind of dreams you see with a fever 39.9 degrees. And now, smoothly moving on to the gameplay, I want to voice one of my personal concerns with the local enemies. While I've praised their appearance and overall mood of the game, In terms of gameplay mechanics, they don't really stand out. Comparisons to Slay the Spire are simply inevitable. Sure, there were simple enemies without any twists, but it's hard to argue with the fact that most of the monsters players encounter throughout their run are memorable and create unique types of pain in the ass. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about the enemies in Shroom and Gloom. Most of them are just guys who hit you and apply protection to themselves. There are rare exceptions, but they won't be anything as unique as Sneko or Transient. And finally, the most important aspect of any deck builder builds. Forgive the tautology. And everything here is ambiguous, as this is just a demo. It has an extremely limited number of cards and opportunities for unique decks. However, there is potential, and I still try to create something coherent. My first run was extremely chaotic. On top of the disease debuff, there was the fact that there were no characters with unique cards or mechanics, meaning the game dumped everything it had on my swollen mind right out of the gate. I took whatever seemed interesting or even vaguely understandable. Even so, I started noticing some card synergies and interesting build paths. I was particularly interested in the food crafting build. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Deck builders, sit down. I'm about to tell you something that might shock you. There are no defense cards in this game at all. I know, I'm shocked as well, I didn't believe it myself at first, but it is what it is. Instead, there are food cards that allow you to restore health. Even though I didn't do anything meaningful in the first run, I still made it to the second boss. And judging by his tentacles rising from underground, he was happy to see me. Sorry, this is incredibly stupid, I know, but I held back for too long and made this review serious. Like, I have a few jokes about dicks and whether the local enemies have mushroom heads. Like, I just had to make the joke. Forgive me for Christ's sake, okay? Anyway, my first run ended in failure, and being sick and sleepy, I went to bed. But the next day, I decided to restart the game to try a more meaningful build. Which I did. It was still all about food and healing, but it looked like something I could work with. There were good cards that generated attacks when I ate something, and attacks that were generating food if I would kill an enemy. But it still didn't help me though, and I never made it past the first run. So what's the bottom line? This roguelike has potential and strengths, and while the demo isn't rich in content, it was enough to keep me interested. So if you're into the card roguelike genre, I highly recommend checking this one out. You might even get further than I did. Whew, that was a long talk, isn't it? Now I suggest we move on to our next stop. We're leaving the bright, surreal mushroom caves behind and moving on to the more down-to-earth black and white pages of manga. Yeah, you hear me right. Let's get out our pens and papers because we, boys and girls, are going to draw our own manga. Well, not actually draw, but we're gonna make our manga deck. I learned about the Fable, not to be confused with RPG Fable, thanks to my brother, for which I'm very grateful. From the first glance at the gameplay, you can tell that the game is already different from other deck builders, and for good reason. The thing is, instead of cards, we're assembling manga panels. During combat, the player on the right has a board consisting of 12 spaces, into which they can place various panels drawn from their deck this turn. Each panel performs a specific action, has a unique shape, and occupies a specific number of spaces. Thus, by composing a specific sequence of actions from the available panels, the player must overcome enemy encounters. And yes, since we're creating our own manga, the panels are read according to the rules of manga reading, namely from right to the left. The game conventionally indicates which panel will be counted based on its position, and you may have noticed there's no health indicator, and you might be wondering how you can lose and how enemies deal damage to you. It's quite simple. Yes, the player doesn't have health as such. Enemies damage the board where you place your panels, destroying random cells in this turn, and the numbers above enemies display how many cells will they damage. But do not worry, The window will renew all the damaged cells next turn, or if you really need to create a specific sequence, you can use tape to fix some spaces. The victory or defeat conditions are very simple. All battles take place over 5 turns, and whether you manage to defeat all your opponents within that time determines the outcome of your run. The game features 3 characters: Akira, Yoko, and Suzuki. I spent most of my runs on Akira because of his simplicity. His primary builds revolve around melee and shooting. But it's funny that an animal build can be part of a melee deck. Yes, Akira has several separate animal cards that, taken together, form their own mini-build. So, given that there's a panel with a lion and that they're all like cards that fit into your pocket, is it safe to say you can make a build with pocket pussy? I'm sorry I'm like this. Or am I? I won't go into detail about the other 2 characters, so you can test their mechanics yourself if you're interested. But I will say this: Suzuki is my favorite. I love complex characters in games like this, who make my brain race even harder. It's also worth mentioning that in the classic version, runs consist not only of fights but also various events. In addition to standard levels that allow you to upgrade, remove or purchase panels, there are also minigames. Upon entering a level, you'll be assigned a random minigame, and for completing it, you'll receive panels of the corresponding quality. Minigames are completely random and have no connection to the main loop. They can range from a reaction game, where you have to perfectly cut a guy's hair, to a memory game, where you have to remember the entire sequence of actions in 10 seconds. One interesting thing about upgrading is that sometimes, in addition to improving the panel's effect itself, you can reduce its size and create multiple copies of it within a single panel. In plain English, instead of having, say, 2 identical weapon reload cards, the upgraded version fits 2 copies into a single panel instance. This way, more different cards can end up in your hand at the start of your turn. And what about the length of the game? The game itself is short. It consists of 3 chapters with 3 bosses at the end, and a single run on standard difficulty takes around half an hour. It is incredibly simple at its core, which is a plus for me personally. While Shroom and Gloom throws a huge number of cards and concepts at the player, the Fable is very concise and therefore doesn't overwhelm you from the start. I won't go into detail about the style as I did with the Mushroom Dungeons. Everything here is simple and tasteful. It's standard pixel art, and as an Sprite user, I completely approve it. And the music is great, the menu soundtrack just hits. And the sound after finishing a level is listen to it for yourself. Again. Just one more time. Near orgasm. So there you have it. As mentioned earlier, this is a very simple and short game at its core. It won't offer you some kind of transcendental experience for the rest of your life, and it's unlikely to completely blow your mind. The same applies to Shroom and Gloom. But that doesn't mean they're not worthy of attention, and perhaps that's the whole point of this video. You know, we spend a lot of time playing online shooters or other huge projects that can take up half our lives. And I don't blame anyone for that. Guys, I also like to unwind in the evening with Valorant, the finals, or at worst, the latest Friend Swap. And there's nothing wrong with that. These games are cool, easy to understand, and we've gotten used to them. But sometimes I think we just need to try something different, something that won't necessarily be with us forever, but is still a worthy project. The games in this video are pretty cheap. Shroom and Gloom is still in demo, but the Fable is already fully released and costs a measly $10. Some bundles and battle passes in the games are more expensive. Over the past couple of years, I've repeatedly encountered the concept of gaming impotence, and even experienced it to some extent myself. And in my case, playing games that are a couple of hours long helped me overcome this feeling and rekindle my love for gaming more than some larger titles. So, if something can make you happy, even for a couple of hours, and reignite your love for video games. Isn't that enough reason to give it a try?